Intertalk Radio, you're in to all things music.
One thing I used to think was a disadvantage. I always loved the way John Coltrane played or David Sanborn. And every time I pick up my alto and try to play like David Sanborn, I'd always sound like Najee. So I learned that that was a blessing, that maybe I need to learn and love the voice I've been given and just develop that. Mm-hmm. And I always tell young students, I always say, listen, do something that the world hasn't heard. They've heard me. They've heard it. When I hear people say, I want to be like you, I'm like, don't be like me, because then you deny the world your gift that you've been given, So just share the world from your perspective, because the world will accept that.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to the show, and thanks for tuning in. I want to let you know how much I appreciate you joining us on our show. If you missed last week's interview, you can hear it and all of our episodes at entertalkradio.com/makingit, or download our app and take us with you. Also, be sure to tune in to hear my upcoming conversations with bassist Nathan East, choreographer, singer, actress Tony Basil, and award-winning R&B pop producer, songwriter Barry Eastman. So often I get asked questions about the creative process, so I created this show to focus on what it takes to have a lasting career in the ever-changing landscape of the music business. You're really in for a treat, as I've invited my friends, some of the best and brightest in music, to share their stories on how they have influenced the music that has shaped our lives. I guarantee you're going to love it. So let's get started. My guest today is saxophonist composer Najee. Najee is a master storyteller. This multi-platinum selling and Grammy-nominated contemporary jazz pioneer has made a career of reinventing himself, sparking trends, and never resting on his laurels. He recently celebrated his 30th anniversary as a recording artist. Najee has collaborated with iconic figures including Stevie Wonder, Prince, Quincy Jones, Chaka Khan, Herbie Hancock, and George Duke. He just released Poetry in Motion, his 17th album as a solo artist. Please welcome my guest today, Najee.
Hey man. How's it going, Terry?
I'm good. It's nice to hear your voice. I know we're not getting to see each other right now, but happy to be speaking with you. Yeah, always. You and I have had a long friendship. Although we don't get to work together very often, but the few times that we have, it's always been a joy for me. So I wanted to let you know that. And
well, me as well. Yes, sir.
Oh, thanks, man. So let's just start off by just talking about your new record, which is called Poetry in Motion.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, it was one of those records that I didn't start, I'm not one of those artists that starts out with a plan in his head as to what kind of record I should do. I, through my associations, things just kind of come to me. And this was a project where I, in casual conversation with friends, I say, listen, we need to do something together. I didn't think everybody was going to show up on one record. So when we started the project, we ended up with having Will Downing, Eric Roberson, Maysa, Incognito, Bobby Lyle and
Blake Aaron.
Yes, and Blake Aaron. Yes, and so by the end of the record, I had all these great artists that participated in the project, and based on my conversation with Will Downing, who had a line in one of the songs where he says in the lyrics, he says, like poetry in motion. And I said, Will, can I name the record Poetry in Motion? He said, man, I'd be honored, And that's how it came about. And then I had the good fortune, as you know, to work with the legendary producer, Grammy award-winning producer, Barry Eastman, who I've known probably for, going on 35, 40 years now. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of came together the way it did, and without really a real plan. And this is what we ended up with. So,
is that kind of how your whole life and career has been, without a plan? I mean, I know. No. And let me preface by saying I know you went to a music conservatory. I mean, it's not like you've been randomly bumping around, but pretty much, do you never have a plan? You just move forward?
You know what? I am a planner, but not in the way that I guess the traditional way that we're all conditioned to think, in the sense that, you plan this, you plan that by this age. But, I always found that method to be stressful for me personally. But what I've been fortunate is in my career, I've been fortunate that one opportunity always opened up another one, so ever since I was a kid in high school, I was just always blessed to have opportunities that came my way, and I take advantage of them at the time, and that always would lead to something else and something else and something else. And that's how it's been for me.
So have there been periods of your life where that hasn't happened as quickly as you would hope, or do you generally fall into the next thing? Oh, okay. Like most of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. You know how this business can be, but
sure, absolutely.
Particularly in the early days, I was a kid that I grew up in New York City in Queens, an area of Queens called Jamaica, Queens, New York. And, in that community, there was just a great community of musicians. And out of that, I was one of the musicians, as well as Marcus Miller and a few others that kind of came into the industry. And for me, it was kind of a sideways motion because I went to a high school in New York City called August Martin High School, which was really an aviation school. I went there to become a pilot. That was my first career choice. But because I played music and we had such a strong music department, I'll never forget taking my first tenor saxophone solo at the age of 15 in front of an audience in the jazz band. And all the girls knew my name the next day. So I had a quick career change.
Right. And they did not know any of the pilots' names. I promise you that.
Quick career change. And, it was great because we had back then, we had visitors that would come and perform at the school. And on one occasion, we had the legendary Dr. Billy Taylor, who came to the school and invited the young musicians. So we had quite a few young, gifted musicians in our school. So he invited us to join the Jazzmobile program. And that's how, for me, jazz and just my evolution in that began. So.
Do you still fly? Do you have a pilot's license?
No, I don't have a pilot's license. I think after September 11th, I just, gave all that up. I just, I used to recreational fly out of Van Nuys on a couple of occasions, but I stopped doing that. So.
Understandably. Yeah, that changed a lot of things for everybody.
It really did. Yeah.
Yeah. And it has certainly changed the way the way our touring lives has been. It's been much more challenging to tour since then and far less glamorous, with how much longer it takes to, navigate through an airport, and security and all the things that are important.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's definitely not fun. That's for sure.
Right.
When I was a kid, and you probably remember these days, flying was like an excitement. It was a joy,
yes.
For a young kid. But now it's more
Absolutely.
like, okay,
Yeah. Well, now when you hear bands and artists saying, that they'd much rather be on the bus part of the tour than the flying part of the tour because they don't have to deal with airports.
Right.
That's a complete
Absolutely.
turnaround.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about your relationship with Barry Eastman, who produced your new record, who you've worked with before. I actually spoke with Barry yesterday because I wanted to let him know you were going to be on the show. And I got a quote from him, and I want to read it, and then we can talk about your very beautiful friendship and collaborations that you've been, having with him for a long time. So here's what Barry said. This is actually my second time producing Najee. The first time was about 30 years ago on his Day by Day album. When we got together for this new album, I knew that I wanted to take him back to the vibe of the earlier albums. He's such a wonderful player and a great guy, and it was a joy to be in the studio with him again. Truly a pleasure. And by the way, he used 2 exclamation marks.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. Well, I've known Barry, gosh, I think our first time I met Barry, it was through my brother, Fareed, who played guitar.
He's a guitar player? Yeah.
Yes, he's a guitar player. He doesn't play anymore now. He stopped touring. I think the last tour he did was the Don't Stop tour with Jeffrey Osborne. And he came off the road and we built the studio in New York City, and he became the head engineer and producer of my records back then, And
didn't he also become your manager?
Yes, now he currently does that because he enjoys staying home and just doing contracts. He loves that. We met through him. My brother Fareed knew Barry, and then there was another producer by the name of Wayne Brathwaite. And Wayne Brathwaite and Barry Eastman were a duo at that time. They would produce people like Billy Ocean, Phyllis Simon. I think they did some work on Kenny G's very first album, I believe. So, they had quite a clientele back then. Tom Jones, the legendary singer from the UK. Yeah. So occasionally Barry would invite me to come do record dates for him. I remember we were just talking probably a few weeks ago I said, Barry, whatever happened to that Tom Jones record we did, and he said it came out, but he can't seem to find it anymore, But so those are the kind of things he would call me for projects like Freddie Jackson. And when I got signed and my second album was about to start recording, he was part of a group called the Hush Productions, which was the production company I was signed to, which was owned by the R&B singer Melba Moore and her husband. So, and so he was hired to come in and do 2 songs on that record. And we haven't worked since that time,
So it must have been really nice to reconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He's known for such great work, and he's worked with so many wonderful people, Al Jarreau, Anita Baker, Freddie Jackson, You Are My Lady, all that stuff. So he's a guy that, as you know, he can go between the R&B world and the jazz world very easily, Right. And we always say, to me, he's like the East Coast George Duke, the equivalent of what George is on the West Coast.
Sure.
Was, and yes.
And that's a perfect compliment to you as an artist, because you have always fallen very comfortably between jazz and R&B. I've never felt like you've been out of place in either one of those worlds, and you've managed to combine those elements in a very natural way, an honest way.
Well, the best I can, I think part of it is because I just get bored with myself, But ever since I was a kid, we played, in my neighborhood where I came from, R&B bands were the thing, and show bands. And so as a teenager, I played in this show band at the time called Area Code. And they, we did all the latest songs of the time. And we even got to tour. My first world tour was actually at the age of 18 for the USO. Playing with that band, we would go all over the world, in Europe and Central America and all these places, and entertain the troops. And so that is where I got I think the initial beginning of my R&B experience. But however, I was encouraged to study jazz as a result of being a member of Jazzmobile. And then at one point I studied flute at Manhattan School of Music, where I was, got a chance to really study classical music. And that happened all the way up until I began college in Boston, at the conservatory. So,
how did you choose New England Conservatory over Juilliard or Berkeley or any of the other great schools in the country?
It was funny because there was a friend of mine that I grew up with by the name of Ed Jackson, a great alto saxophone player. And one day in the summer, I ran into him on the New York City subway. He was home for the summer from school. And I said, man, I haven't seen you. Where you been? Blah, blah, blah. And he said, hey, man, I went up to Boston. I got the opportunity to study with the legendary Joe Allard. Now, Joe Allard was known in the saxophone community as one of the greatest teachers in the world. He's taught people like John Coltrane, Eric Dolphy, David Sanborn, Michael Brecker. And so he was telling me that Joe was teaching both at Juilliard and New England. But he told me that New England Conservatory had begun this jazz program under the tutelage of Ernie Wilkins, who I knew from Jazzmobile. So I decided to apply to the school along with my brother, and we went up, we auditioned, and that was it. We got the audition and got into school for that next September, and next thing I knew, we had the figure out how to pay for it. But we found ourselves in Boston. You know?
Sure.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much how it happened. It was really my interest in wanting to study with Joe Allard, who was, an amazing, he was actually the first clarinetist with Toscanini for many years. Mm-hmm. And then, but he's taught so many wonderful people, throughout his career. So
how did you balance your time in school and even now with being sort of you're multi-instrumentalist, but not a triple threat, a quadruple threat with, soprano, alto, tenor, and of course, flute. Did you?
I wish that. Mm-hmm.
Were you just like falling asleep with the clarinet in one hand and a flute in the other? Or,
well, you know what? As a youngster, back then, when music was an important part of American education system,
I remember,
particularly in New York City, it was always encouraged that you learn to double, because most of the teachers I encountered, like Jimmy Heath and Ernie Wilkins, they were people who played more than just the saxophone. They played flute, clarinet,
right?
And I actually started on clarinet in elementary school, and then when I got to junior high school, I began to pick up saxophone, and but throughout my musical experience then, during those years, because big bands were still something that was important to the music scene in New York City, you were always encouraged to be able to do more than just play one instrument. And you were encouraged to read music as well. So that's how it began for me. So those things became a part of me. And then one occasion for a year when I was 16 years old, my saxophones were stolen. So all I had was the flute. And so for a year, I just played flute until I could get another saxophone. And,
that's
so
such a great example of,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, because flute is such a strong part of how you are known and how you express yourself so beautifully. And,
yes.
and it's so interesting how life experiences that present themselves as negative or challenging can actually be gifts.
Yes. And that is, for me, that is definitely the truth, because once I focused on flute, I actually fell in love with it. I was a fan of Hubert Laws at the time, and Yusuf Lateef and Herbie Man and
Herbie Man,
and I had the privilege. Yes, absolutely. And I had the privilege of studying with a gentleman from the Juilliard who played with the New York Philharmonic, but I would study on the weekends at the Manhattan School of Music twice a month with Harold Jones, who was known as a classical flute player. Yeah, so that began my interest in trying to develop on the instrument, and ultimately became of who I am. So now, I don't even bother to call myself a saxophonist or flute player. I just call myself a multi-instrumentalist and be happy with that, because
smart.
They all are part of me in some way, So
on that thought and on that note, we will be right back. We're heading into our first break. I'm here with Najee, and we're going to be talking about how the music industry has changed you and how you've changed it, and just life in general. So stick around.
Serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Maysa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Roberson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Hi, I'm Tim Dolbear, the host of Sound Experience on Intertalk Radio. Each week, I talk with top professional audio engineers, producers, musicians, and the manufacturers that make the tools that we use in the studio each and every day. From capturing the perfect take to mastering your final release, and the tools and how the pros use them, we are going to dive deep into their process and learn from their experience. I look forward to you joining us each week on Sound Experience with me, your host, Tim Dolbear.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be the music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Hey, everybody, this is Will Lee, and you're listening to Making It with Terry Wood.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome back, and you are listening to the beautiful music of Najee, who happens to be a 2-time platinum and 4-time gold album seller. You and I were just reminiscing during the break of the days when you could actually sell that many albums. Yes. When you put out something that was of the highest quality.
Yes.
Things have changed a bit.
Quite a bit, I would say. I mean, everything from music distribution to recording to music distribution to even royalties,
Right.
But, the plus and minuses are well known. I mean, I was fortunate that when I got signed, my very first record, it was one of those things that I was blessed to come right into the big machine, the Capitol EMI Records machine. And,
right.
There was a huge amount of publicity spent, that you were on TV more, doing things, that kind of thing, which helped to sell records,
Right.
And the timing, most importantly, was probably critical because I got to be honest with you. When I started, I didn't have a clue as to what I was doing. I wasn't going out there to say, I'm going to get signed and I'm going to create these records and I'm going to have a gold record, a platinum record. I mean, I was totally ignorant to what all that stuff really meant back then, And it just so happened that we did this album, and it was through a production company out of New York called Hush Productions, and that had a great production deal with the Capitol EMI Records. And they gave me a budget of $60,000, and I took a bunch of demos. We recorded it, and I pretty much thought we were done with it. And then the record came out, and I went on a tour with Freddie Jackson, who at the time was doing huge arenas. I mean, playing these huge arenas every night. And I'd go out there, do my little 15 minutes, and 3 months later, we had a gold record. And to show you how naive I was, I thought because, when you go to EMI or Capitol Records building, you always see people with gold records. You got Nat King Cole, you got Frank Sinatra, you got all these artists. I thought it was just a ritual. I didn't realize that I really had a career, So,
well, you really did kind of explode. I mean, I believe it was 1987 when your first record came out, and
86 actually. Yes, that's true.
86, and just like me, my first solo record was 1988, and I remember a lot of people saying, "Where did you come from?" Because exactly. All this, like, I remember not having heard of you, and then you were everywhere, and I was a fan. And I know, I remember people. Yeah, it was. But you did pretty much explode pretty quickly. I mean, I'm not saying your career happened quickly, but when you made that first record, it was we all heard about it.
Yeah. Yes. And it's funny because when I think back to that record, I wasn't really planning. They called it jazz, but because I come from a jazz background, I didn't consider it that at all. I looked at it as an R&B record with the saxophone as the voice, which was, when you think about the 70s, as people like George Benson, Bob James, Grover Washington, Ronnie Lawrence, those people changed the culture of jazz as we knew it. And then when the 80s came, in the early 80s, there was somewhat of a decline in sales and interest. And then there was this resurgence, probably in the mid to late 80s is when we started seeing this resurgence. And I happened to be a part of that whole system that began, But I remember being that guy that just came, at least in people's minds, I just came out of nowhere. And here I was at #1 on Billboard for 13 weeks, and everybody had to pay attention, and we were selling real records, so.
Right.
And that's, yeah.
You and I were, I think, fortunate that when we emerged as artists, as solo artists in that time, we got to ride a wave of opportunity. And what I mean by that is that was when people at radio stations, not just program directors, but the actual DJs got to choose what they wanted to play. And they would choose oftentimes what they wanted to play, not based on how much money was being spent on promotion, but how much they liked the song.
Exactly right.
It was in a really exciting time on radio.
It really was. And I recall, back then we would do radio promo tours. So like, for example, I spent a lot of time in cars going to places like, say, from New Orleans to Lafayette, Louisiana, or Lake Charles, and then going on to Houston and Dallas and, all these places in the South and then the Northeast and then ultimately the West Coast where, we actually went to the radio stations and shook hands with the DJs, took them to dinner or lunch or whatever. And, so back then it was a whole different time, just a different way of doing things.
And were you traveling by yourself, or did you have a band that you were driving around the country with?
Well, no, we were actually this was with the radio reps. I mean, the record label, promotional reps. They would actually rent a car. We'd fly to New Orleans or someplace like that. They'd rent a car and we'd drive from town to town.
And you'd go meet folks, right?
Go meet folks. And fortunately, a lot of those people from that time, I still keep in contact in some kind of way, or when I see them or they see me, we just have great memories and stories to share.
I do as well. Yeah. And, and one of the things, when we show our gratitude to them, because I know you're the same way as I am with sharing your appreciation for the people that have been supportive to you. But a lot of these people that help break us on the radio, they're really proud of being one of the first people to play our records. And, so it's a very exciting, I think, conversation. It's very fulfilling when I run into some of those DJs, back in, from Chicago or San Francisco or wherever, where those were the guys that broke my records.
That's right. That's right.
And I do appreciate that. And it's, it is so different now. What do you think, let me see how to pose this question. What do you think is the most profound change about the music industry, since when we started as artists to now, and how has that really impacted you?
Wow. That's a real loaded question, Terry, but I think I don't think it's any one thing. I remember probably it started with digital technology, moving from analog recordings to digital. Being able to store information digitally, when we started with the DAT tapes and all that. I recall, to share a very funny story, I remember I had just, on my 4th album, Just an Illusion, the digital technology was just starting to take off, right? That's after compact CDs and all that. But DAT tapes became available. And I recall, I recorded this album, and 2 weeks later, I was in the Ivory Coast of Africa, and people had copies of my record already. I didn't understand how that could have happened, of course. That was just a label doing their underhanded thing. But I think it started with that and the ability to be able to copy music and then give it away for free, Right. You remember the years of Napster. Is Napster? Yeah, Napster.
It was Napster.
Yeah, when they were able to, when people could download music for free. And then it moved into as digital technology became easy to get without paying for it, we saw retailers begin to suffer. And as a result of that, people not being able to go into record stores and browse. I mean, one of the greatest things, phenomena, as I'm sure everybody agrees with, in the 1980s is when Michael Jackson recorded Thriller. It brought such an influx back into the music industry in terms of money and labels being able to sign new artists and people walking into stores and hearing different things, and asking, well, who's that you're playing, I mean, those things were all part of a system that I think made the music accessible to the people. But, artists were able to at least do more. Plus, the touring system supported all that things. Now things are quite different. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that you probably know this, but I'm not sure if our listeners do. But when Napster came out, they went to the major record labels and to offer the opportunity to either license the technology or buy the technology, and the labels were really arrogant, and they were not forward thinking. They were only thinking about how they had been operating since the first phonograph and how record labels developed. So they missed the boat, and what happened, because instead of joining together or singly, any one of them just buying that technology and managing it in a way that it could have been used maybe in a more controlled environment, it just went haywire. And now there's a whole generation of people, kids to people in their 20s and even upwards, that have never bought a piece of music. They've never paid for a piece of music. And I've spoken to them, and they don't really understand why anybody would.
Right.
And
that's true.
It happened when everybody just sort of blinked.
That's true. And, and then not to mention also when, Steve Jobs, being the brilliant man he was, sees the opportunity to create iTunes and, which is really, actually great in terms of being able to still sell music. But
it's fantastic. I consider them my distributor, or the biggest distributor out there.
But for a time, that period between Napster and then moving into the digital technology and downloading and all that, man, I think that the industry took a turn for the worst, obviously. So
yeah, and I think the only possible good that could come out of that, from our point of view, as composers who count on royalties to help continue to be able to afford to write music and record music, is that it's taught us that we need to create our own future and our own present.
Absolutely.
And that the rules no longer exist. And it's not even about thinking outside of the box. There is no box.
Right. That's true.
So tell me about, go ahead.
No, I was just saying this. It's just, there's also the upside is it's a great opportunity to create differently now, and market differently with all the social media outlets now available to us. And, so. Yeah.
I actually find it exciting, and we can do and must do anything that we want to, we define each of our records now and how they're going to be released and what we want to put out and why we want to put it out. And the collaborations have become, I think, much more interesting and exciting.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I mean, even look at this new song, "Say Something," with Justin Timberlake and Chris Stapleton. I don't know if it's fantastic.
Yes, it is. It is very much.
And not only did they write and record a great song together, but they released it by shooting a live video. And that video, if you've seen it, and if you haven't, go check it out on YouTube or wherever you want to find it. But that was done live. Everybody played live. The singers were live. They hired 60 of the top singers in LA.
Nice.
And I know because I know some of the people that were singing, and that was completely live with live acoustics in this hall. It was this big open building and everything. So that was exciting to me, to see like somebody, who's a mainstream artist, but still is doing what we're doing. They're just they're in the trenches. They're just making up new ways of putting things out that are exciting and musically stimulating.
Yes, totally agree.
So
yes,
when you finished school at New England Conservatory, what was the path from there to you meeting Chaka Khan and going out on the road with her?
Well, let me see. It actually came down to the reality, the hardcore economic reality that I couldn't afford to go anymore. So I ended up leaving in my third year.
So you didn't finish school?
I didn't graduate from there. I ended up, but what I went there to get, I had gotten by that point. I mean, I had the opportunity to play with in the Jackie Byard big band, the George Russell big band, which that music was incredibly. He was the one credited with the Lydian chromatic concept, which was in jazz, one of those theoretical approaches to music. And so all those challenging things that I had gone there for, I had already pretty much accomplished. And it just came down to that I couldn't afford to go anymore. And my brother had moved back to New York, and he was doing a lot of session work, a lot of record dates in the R&B scene in New York at the time. And every time he had an opportunity, he would say, man, if you need a saxophone, you need to hire my brother, man. And so I would make trips, drive down to New York, do sessions. And then at the time I was married, so I got divorced and eventually moved back to New York. And I think the third day I was home, I got back to the city. I was sitting in playing straight ahead with a group in this little club in New York City. And in comes Chaka Khan's musical director. We get to talking, and she calls me like the next day. Says, "Listen, Chaka wants to put a horn section on this tour. So if you come down to the rehearsal and read the charts, I'm sure I can probably get you on." And that's what happened. So I went to the audition, and I remember the horn section at the time was Matt Gallahan. He was the trumpet player for David Bowie, and then Bobby Franceschini, a great tenor saxophone player, and I was the alto player. And then my brother, who happened to just come by a rehearsal that Tony Maton didn't show up for, had his guitar, and Chaka came to the rehearsal that day, saw him with the guitar, and asked him if he could play. Can you play that thing? And he said, yeah. And she said, well, plug up. And he plugged up, and she made him solo, and she hired him on the spot. And then Tony came the next day to rehearsal, and there was 2 guitar players in the band. So that's how it happened.
Oh, that's how that happened. That's great.
That's exactly how it happened. It happened in New York City. I don't remember the name of the rehearsal studio in the village somewhere, but we ended up on the Ain't Nobody tour, and so we did that for approximately almost a year. And then at that time when the tour was over, just pretty much went back to doing odd and ends, odd type gigs here and there, so. And then in 86, I got the opportunity to record the very first album. So.
And you haven't turned back since?
Fortunately, yes. Thank goodness.
Yeah. We're heading into our second break, so stick around. I'm here talking with my friend Najee, and we're going to get personal in this final episode, so don't go away.
And you're listening to Making It with Terry Wolf.
Hi, this is Tim Dolbear, host of Sound Experience here on Intertalk Radio. And Source Connect by Source Element is the essential tool that we use to link between my studio in Austin, Texas, and the WS radio station in San Diego. Now, with Source Connect, not only can we communicate in real time and with HD audio, but it's synced up and is of a high enough quality that I can use it for real-time ADR work, remote recording, and overdubbing, and it even allows me to remotely control a DAW. Source Connect by Source Element. Affordable, high-quality audio and video connection over the internet for all of your production needs.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
I'm Tim Dolbear, the host of Sound Experience on Intertalk Radio. Each week, I talk with top professional audio engineers, producers, musicians, and the manufacturers that make the tools that we use in the studio each and every day. From capturing the perfect take to mastering your final release, and the tools and how the pros use them, we are going to dive deep into their process and learn from their experience. I look forward to you joining us each week on Sound Experience with me, your host, Tim Dolbear.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Maysa, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
This is Aubrey Logan, and you are listening to Making It with Terry Woolman.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome back. You're listening to Najee, who's my guest this week on the show. Your new album sounds great, by the way. And,
thank you very much.
I want to make sure that everybody goes out and gets Poetry in Motion. You can get it on iTunes, or you can go to your site is NajeeOfficial.com?
Yeah, I'm sorry, NajeeOfficial.com. That's right. Yes.
How did that come about? Did somebody else have Najee already.com?
Oh, no. Well, I had it used to be Najee Music. I've gone through several changes,
right.
So, but, everybody went into the official page thing over the last few years. So,
sure.
The publicist that I had it last year, she suggested, so it's Najee Official for both website, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. So.
Okay, so you all go there and check this out, because this album is great, and spend $1, download a tune, come on, man, or get the whole thing. Yes, you won't regret it. So you performed for Nelson Mandela's birthday celebration in South Africa. Come on,
yes.
Was that life changing?
It was for me. It was one of those things that. I couldn't believe I was there, because he just, for the whole historical reasons. So I did. I was very fortunate to be a part of a delegation. I went with Stevie Wonder, Chaka was there, Kenny Lattimore. So it was quite a few of us that went, and he gave a gift to the nation where we did 2 nights in South Africa. One was in Durban, the other was in Johannesburg. So. As part of it, but the real treat was being able to be invited to his home to have lunch with him. That was really nice. It was really nice. So he was such a did you have an opportunity? Man,
did you get to chat with him a little bit?
I did. Yes, we were there. And at the presidential quarters at the time, and one of my dearest photos I have is a picture of he and I and my brother together. Standing in the courtyard. He was he was a very gracious man. Very down to earth and very warm, and he was also very funny. He liked to joke a lot. He was yes.
It's nice to hear. You also were a special guest of President Clinton's at the White House.
Yes. I was fortunate. How that happened was at the time there was a publicist named Ramon Baines who ended up being Michael Jackson's. She was his publicist at the time. But at the time, she also represented Babyface, and they had invited Babyface to perform. And he said to them that he wouldn't have enough time to prepare. Why don't you get Najee? And they agreed, and that's how it how it happened. So
let's, one of the people that you and I both had an opportunity to work with multiple times was the amazing and unique Al Jarreau. Can you tell me, do you remember the first time you met Al? Because I certainly remember the first time I did.
Yes, the very first time I met Al was at the Boston Symphony Hall. I was in college, and I had taken my girlfriend at the time. We went to go see him. We're talking 1979. That's how far back that goes. 1980 maybe. And, so that I don't know how I got backstage. Some kind of way I got backstage, and he was there, and he was just really nice, just a nice man. You know how he was. And then I could have never imagined that years later I would even get to be around him, opening shows for him, and be a part. Like we even went out on a tour, he and I together as a package with Yolanda Adams. I mean, if somebody had told me that back then, I wouldn't have believed it. And so over the years of just working with him off and on, we developed quite a friendship. And the last time I saw him was probably about 3 years ago, maybe. I was over in the UK. He was performing at Ronnie Scott's, and I got a chance to see him and spend a little time with him. And he said to me, Najee, all the years that we've known each other, we never done a record. I was like, Al, I'd be honored if we could do a record together. So that's how Barry Eastman and I, we actually had a song. And of course, we sent the song to him, and he became, he got ill, and the rest is history. But that song ended up being on the record anyway. It's called We'll Be Missing You, which featured Will Downing. Will Downing actually wrote the lyrics to the song, and we dedicated it to Al and to Prince as well, who I've had the pleasure of working with. So,
well, Prince, you were on the road with for, I believe, 2 years.
Yeah, almost 3 actually. It started in 1999. Yeah, 1999 is when we first started working together, and he invited me to Paisley Park. It was in 2000. I went to Paisley Park for just to hang out with him. And
was he a fan of your records, or did you do have mutual friends?
No, he both actually. I had heard there was a few times when in the late 90s when Chaka and I were as a package, and I would actually open the show for Chaka, and someone told me he would be backstage watching my show. I never saw him, and then one evening I was in New York City. Some kind of way I got invited to come to his show at Madison Square Garden. And he sent word to me that he wanted me to come to the after party and to bring my instrument. And that's what I did. I brought my flute, and I went to the after party. I played. And then Dougie Fresh, the rapper, about 2 weeks later, Dougie called me. He says, yo, the artist is looking for you. So I said, okay. So then about maybe in a short time later, this guy calls me. He says, Najee, I have the artist here. He would like to speak to you. I said, okay. Prince gets on the phone. He says, yo, man, what's up? I said, I don't know, man, what's up? He says, when you and I getting together? I said, I don't know. He says, well, what are you doing right now? I was like, I'm at home. And at the time I was living in L.A. He said, well, why don't you come out to Minneapolis? I said, well, I can't come right now. He said, well, when can you come? I said, maybe about a week. He said, I'll have somebody call you. Click, just like that, man. So he arranged to travel. He brings both my brother and out there to Paisley, and end up being out there for about 2 weeks. And I start recording this album with him called Rainbow Children. And then he asked me in between that session time, he asked me if I would join the MPG for a 2-week tour. Before I knew it, man, 3 years had gone by. I didn't leave the band until 2003, And, I would go in and out, of course, to do my stuff. And he would have Candy Dolfer or Maceo, between the three of us, we would alternate. But, yeah.
Boy, that's a cool camp to be in.
Oh, it was, Learned a lot.
George, you did, yeah, I would imagine. By the way, how did you choose to bring your flute instead of an alto or tenor?
I don't play alto anymore, but I it's easy to carry. It's easy to carry. Yeah. And apparently he tapes everything. He videotaped everything back then, So Dougie Fresh was telling me that they were on a tour bus and Prince was watching the tape of me play flute. And he asked Dougie to get in touch with me, So and that's how the whole thing began. Yeah.
That's great.
Yes, it is.
Well, that's another reminder of why it's just important to be open and ready and willing.
Yeah, oh, yes, absolutely.
You also had a close friendship and working relationship with George Duke. Yes.
You worked with George, so you know how great a person he was and a musician. It started with me. The very first time I worked with George was on a record called Just an Illusion that I did, my 4th album, and he produced a song with Jeffrey Osborne and I on that record. And then from there, we began doing concert dates together, touring and, records and all of that. And then ultimately, he produced an album called Songs from the Key of Life, which was my last album on EMI Capitol Records at the time, and which was a tribute to Stevie Wonder. And he brought in everybody on that album. I mean, he had, we mentioned Abraham Laborio. He was on there, yeah. Sheila E., Patrice Rushen, Stanley Clarke. I mean, there was so many people on that record. And a lot of the original members of Stevie Wonder's band that played on the original version of that record, like James Gatson. And, so.
I'm just grinning right now as you're telling me that, just to be able to recreate those classic songs with some of the musicians that were there first time around.
Oh, my God. Herbie was on it. And what's crazy? I'll never forget the conversation. He and I, we had this conversation about Herbie Hancock. And I'm thinking to myself, man, you George, dude, why do we need Herbie, And he was like, nah, man, we're going to bring Herbie in on this. But he was the kicker. We couldn't find Herbie, Herbie was gone somewhere. And as fate would have it, I don't understand how this happens, but I'm boarding a flight in New York City, coming to L.A., and who's sitting right there in the first seat as I walk on the plane? Herbie Hancock. And I say to Herbie, Herbie, you playing on my record or what, man? And he says, oh, man, I'm just coming from Europe, man. I'm sorry. I'll be there. We set the session time for something like 2:00 in the afternoon the next day. Herbie shows up something like 1 a.m. the following morning. And he comes in there, puts a bottle of cognac on the piano, man. And when I tell you that this song that he played on, it was so harmonically advanced. I mean, and George could see my concern. And George looked at me and said, no, man, don't worry. We're just going to use a solo. We're not going to use his comping,
That's a good
George
producer.
Was a great guy, man. I loved him.
Absolutely.
I miss him. Yeah.
We've got about 5 minutes left in the show,
Sure.
and I want to ask you a couple of questions that I end each show with. The first is a 2-part question. Sure. What does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally? And also, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if I really understand what making it is. I do know that for me, happiness, you being at peace with what you do, and taking the bitter with the sweet. I was probably one of those guys that never took this thing so serious, like really bought into the whole superstar thing, and that has served me well. And, in hindsight, because, when the downtimes come, which is inherent in our business, you're going to have lull periods. And fortunately for me, because I had my brother and I together, we just done well in the sense that I was never, flamboyant, where I had to have a whole lot of material excesses and stuff. I've always, invested in, things that made sense. And so when those periods came, we were never stressing about, okay, well, we're not on the road now. Well, it's okay. We're not on the road now. We're going to be back out there, but we're good,
Right.
So for me, making it is really just establishing a life that you can manage and that you're happy, with it, and not really taking this thing too serious, And the answer, the other part of your question was the 3 things, I think you said?
3 tips for success that have driven your career.
3, well, I think obviously hard work is important, but hard work without stress, being patient with yourself. When you're making certain choices regarding actual creative things, try to do things that hasn't been done before. One thing I used to think was a disadvantage, I always loved the way John Coltrane played or David Sanborn. And every time I pick up my alto and try to play like David Sanborn, I'd always sound like Najee. So I learned that was a blessing, that maybe I need to learn and love the voice I've been given and just develop that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell young students, you know, or young people, I always say, listen, you know, do something that the world hasn't heard. They've heard me. They've heard of, you know, when I hear people say, you know, I want to be like you, like, don't be like me, because then you deny the world your gift that you've been given, you know. So just share the world from your perspective, because the world will accept that, you know.
I agree. You know, it brings to mind something I just read that Paul Jackson Jr. wrote as a tribute to our friend Ndugu Chancellor, who just passed away.
Yes.
And, you know, he had done a lot of sessions with Ndugu, but Ndugu never called him to play on any of his own projects and records. And Paul asked him why. You know, he said, how come you never call me, man? And he goes, I'll call you when you learn to sound like Paul Jackson Jr.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I never knew that story, you know.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah. And it created a shift for Paul to you know, find his own voice as an artist. And then, yeah. And he certainly wasn't lacking for experience in the recording studio. So
sure. Yes.
But I thought that was a really beautiful, you know, Ndugu was also just a very, besides gifted, he was very generous as a teacher and mentor and friend to so many people.
Oh, yes, he was. Yeah, he's one that George brought in on that record we were talking about, too. He played on there. Yeah, he was an amazing musician.
Absolutely.
Yes.
My final question, Najee, is at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. I would probably tell my younger self, you know, to pay attention to the decisions you make, you know, because decisions are something that go on instantaneously in everyone's life. But every decision, whether good or bad, carries a consequence. So in trying to have intentions to make good decisions in order to up the balance where you have good consequences as opposed to bad ones. I wish as a young boy that somebody said to me, man, be careful the decisions you make, you know, because they have long-term impact, long-term effects. So, but
that's
you know, as life goes, I've made some terrible decisions, but I've also made some great ones. So, you know, life is a balance in the end. You know,
it certainly is.
Yes,
we've got
sir.
about 30 seconds. What would you like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, well, I want to thank you, Terry, for the time, you know, to share a little bit of my story. It's an honor, and just want to thank the audience for those of you who've supported me going on 31 years now, you know, to be here doing what I love to do. And it still surprises me when I go to sold out concerts that people actually paid to see me do this.
They sure do. And you have some loyal fans. They really have stuck with you for 31 years.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
it's pretty wonderful and well-deserved. Well, thanks for spending the hour. I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you. And, you know, Najee and I, we got some music up our sleeves together that we're going to be making this coming year. So,
absolutely.
So we'll keep you posted. And thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next week. Have a great one.
Episode of Making It with Terry Woman.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Hi, this is Tim Dolbear from Eclectica Studios. I'm a full-time mixing and recording engineer. I work with Grammy winners, labels, and indie artists, using state-of-the-art digital mixing and restoration tools and the very best in analog gear. Really, though, it's my ability to bring tracks to life and fulfill your vision for your music. This has made me sought after by producers and artists worldwide. So spend your time working on music and not chasing a mix down a rabbit hole. Go to timdolbear.com and check out our free one-song mix offer.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Maysa, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.